I learn people by the drift of their promises. From below, the world is all light and echo. Things fall into the sea, and the sea keeps them not hidden exactly, but saved in a way that lets me visit them when the tide is kind. A glove, a button, a name hummed once and never finished. I found him because he spoke into the fog. At first, I thought it was another gull or a bell, but the sound cut through the air like a line. His name quietly pulled out into the dark. James. It fit into the water like a coin fitting a well. I watched him from the surface, where light bends and people look like small, bright things moving on a living glass. He was alone on his vessel, shoulders taut with routine, eyes trained on the horizon as if it might open into something easier. There was a steadiness about him that made me curious, a worn habit of looking for land. The fog came often in those days, soft as wool and thick as a secret. When it rolled across the water, it carried more than mist. It carried memory. He would hum to himself sometimes, small tunes that belonged to no song I knew, and the sound was a map. The more he hummed, the more the sea leaned in. I liked the way he lit the lantern and lowered it, as if testing the water with a small sun. I liked the way he stared at the light when he thought no one was watching. He was not loud. He was careful. The kind of careful that keeps things safe for a while. Once, when the fog was thin and the moon was a blade, I drifted close enough to see the lines at the corner of his mouth. He squinted at the dark, and I thought I saw something like memory move over his face. He said my name one night without knowing why, and the shape of it made my heart, if I could call what I felt a heart slow and sweet. He dropped a lantern to the water, thinking it would light nothing. It hung there like a glass bubble, refusing to sink. He reached out, and for the briefest breath, I allowed my hand fingers like kelp, cold and curious, to brush his. It was a small, deliberate touch, and the world held still, as if agreeing to that single thing. After that, he came every night. Not too close, never too close, but close enough to leave things. Small gifts that meant little to a shore-bound life, but everything to me: a button, a strand of cloth, a thing that had belonged to someone else, and therefore belonged to me by the sea's rules. Once there was a locket, old, with the kind of tarnish that tells a long, folded story. He left it where the water would find it. It bobbed like a lost thought until I nudged it with my nose and watched the metal open in the dusk. Inside, a photograph: two figures on a pier, small and smiling, their edges soft with the way photos become ghosts. One face I could not place, the other, a man with the same quiet eyes. I kept the locket close, the way some people keep a letter pressed in a book. It fit against my chest like a memory that needed remembering. I thought what we had was simple: a pair of strangers meeting across a glassy divide. A small ritual that felt like a secret blessing. I sang to him sometimes, though I did not know if he heard. My voice is not the same as a human voice. It moves in currents, in frequencies that fold the world differently. Still, once or twice, he paused and listened. He would look down, and for a breath, he believed the water had something to say. But the sea keeps more than gifts. It holds questions, too. The fog began to bring knocking soft, patient taps against the hull, 3 slow beats that sounded like counting. I listened because the ocean teaches you to listen. The knocks had no visible cause. They were a thing the water did when it wanted attention. I asked the surface once, in as many shapes as I could form, what it wanted. There was an answering silence that tasted like metal. The knocks came again, and with each one, I felt a weight pressing on the place where my ribs might be. One night, when the moon was a thin smile, he leaned over the rail and called into the fog. He called my name without knowing. "Come back," he said, or maybe he said someone else's name and it slid into mine. Words are slippery at sea. Meaning shifts as easily as light. He reached down and touched the water with both his hands cupped, as if trying to scoop a memory out of the tide. I came near, close enough that the water broke around him and sent cold up his arms. He whispered that he had been waiting for a promise to be kept. He said very quietly, "You promised you'd come back." The locket felt heavy then, older somehow, as if its edges had been smoothed by 1,000 tides of time that belonged to him more than to me. I did not remember making that promise, but memory under the sea is strange. Things become loops, old seasons folding into new weather. Perhaps I had promised in another life, perhaps in a time when breath was simpler. He asked me if I wanted to come aboard. He seemed to imagine reaching across and pulling me onto his deck, putting a cabin between the ocean's wanting and my wanting. I wanted nothing so much as to step through that imagined door, to know the smell of coffee in a morning that held him, to have a small room where he hummed while he worked, to anchor the drifting parts of me. But the sea does not allow such crossings without a cost. To leave would be to unmake pieces of myself I would miss forever. And there is something else I realized. His memory of me was not the same as my remembering of him. He remembers a dock I did not recognize. A day sunlit and dry, with both of us smiling at an event I have no memory of. I remember an edge of water, a promise whispered into salt that might have been my own longing and not his. We both keep versions of a truth that do not perfectly overlap. Perhaps every story between land and sea is stitched from two mismatched threads. I tried to teach myself to speak, to make a single clear sound that would become his name in his ears. I tried to show him the locket without frightening him, to lay it where he could take it without seeing my hand. He saw the locket once more and stared at the photograph until his face went very small and careful. He said, "I don't remember this," and a small raw thing opened inside him like a bruise. He talked to the fog as if the fog might answer him. He told the empty air, "I've been waiting." I wanted to tell him that waiting changes things, that when you wait long enough, the thing you waited for arrives altered. I wanted to say, "You have been waiting for the memory of a promise, not the promise itself." The knocks began to change, coming closer as if the ocean was impatient. One night, he leaned low and asked the water to give him a sign. He wanted proof. I thought of the locket and nearly gave it, but when I nudged it toward the rail, it bobbed and then slipped beneath the surface. He reached. His fingers closed on nothing. For a moment he laughed, a small human sound, and my longing swelled like a tide over a rocky shore. And then he looked up, and there was something in his expression like recognition of an absence. He whispered, "I thought I knew." There are times I wonder if I am the one who is imagined. Perhaps he is the story the sea tells itself to feel less alone. Perhaps I am a shape the waves learn to hum into being. All I know is that when he is near, my world tightens to the size of him. The fog grew one last time in that season. Not threatening, but thick enough that sound fell into it like a stone. He came to the rail and called my name with a voice that had no armor left. He pressed a small scrap of paper into the lantern's light, as if illuminating memory could make it more real. He said he wanted to keep the promise, to bring back what had been lost. He promised gentleness, a quiet room, songs that would belong to both of us. He said simply, "Come back if you can." Promises are tender things. They can be anchors or they can be weights. I realized then that coming back could mean more than leaving the sea. Perhaps it meant letting him carry the memory forward, even if I could not cross his land. I left the locket on the tide that night. Not as surrender, not as loss, but as an offering, a thing that might hold his reflection when he needed it. After that, he changed. He began to speak to the water without looking for me. Sometimes he read aloud from old books. Sometimes he sang half-remembered songs, badly matched to the sea, but honest. The sound of him talking to empty air made the fog less hollow. He hummed into the fog. Then he would sit by his lantern with the photograph and look for traces of himself in the glass. One morning, I found a new object at the surface, a small paper boat folded clumsily. Inside, a note written a careful hand. If you remember me at all, remember gently. Beneath it, a sketch of two figures, one leaning over water, the other looking up. The drawing wasn't accurate to any dock, I knew, but the feeling of it was painfully perfect. He never forced the meeting he dreamed of. Instead, he kept his distance and made room for memory to be tender. There are nights I think I could go to him completely, to leave the surf for a small room and coffee and the smell of his shirt. But every time I near that possibility, I feel the sea around me, telling me I would be smaller on the other side. I would lose the part of me that is tide and moon and the habit of speaking to currents. So I stay, not as punishment, as choice. I choose the water because the water remembers the right way. I choose to be a story that he might come back to, not one he could keep in a drawer. Sometimes, when the fog is thin, he presses his forehead to his hands and whispers, "I don't understand." I surface close enough to hear, and I reply with song. He listens, and in listening, there is a kind of reconciliation. If someone asks what we were to one another, I will say this. He was a shore I learned to watch for. He was a sound that taught me the meaning of patient longing. I am the sea that kept him waiting, and the place that returns pieces when the world has softened them enough. I remember him in the way the tide remembers where a shell has rolled. I keep the locket sometimes, and sometimes I set it free. Either way, I know the promise was kept, not in the way he asked, but in the way the ocean keeps everything until we are ready to receive it. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my story. If you enjoy exploring the currents of the strange and unexplained, make sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. You never know what we might uncover next.